Project Cream Puff is moving right along. And some of the more recent things that I've been able to do is get the stainless steel braided brake lines on the car and also got the sweet stereo installed. But now there's some other brake line issues I need to address. Unfortunately, a lot of the brake lines are pretty rusted and the fittings are actually seized to the lines. So I'm gonna have to make some new hard lines, which I'm not really excited about, but I can do it and I will do it. We've got our fittings here, we've got our flaring tool, our cheap bending tool, and our cutting tool. So first things first, I'm gonna take our spool here and straighten some of it out. There's actually a tool to straighten it, but I don't have that tool. It's a bit more money than I want to spend or have to spend, so we're just gonna kind of straighten out a good chunk of this by hand, and then we'll kind of line up the line we need to make and see how long it is. So we're just gonna start on one end here and kind of loop it around and get a general idea of how long this line needs to be. So we're gonna give it a bit more because I would like to have some extra. Go. We've got our line. Now first step is going to be to flare it. So we're going to go ahead and put it in the vise. Insert it just far enough to where it is level with our tool here. This is step one. Be very careful when we remove this so we don't bend it. So now we have a bubble flare. And take it one step further, we're going to tighten this down and we're going to turn it into a double inverted flare. I'm going to slide our tube nut on down there. Yeah, it looks really good. Now it's bending time. Now this is going to be interesting because it's a nice tight 90 and then a 90. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use these guys. Now we bend as sharp of a 90 as we can with our pliers. Bend another 90. Okay. There we go. Let's go try putting that on the car. That's pretty all right. Not perfect, but looks pretty close. It's good enough for me. Now for the next one that's a pain. This one is a bit more complex. Several more bends in it. A couple of tight back-to-back bends, so this is going to be very interesting. First things first, deburr, and let's put some flares on. Well, it has started raining. Oh, dude, that's freaking money. Dude, where did my 10 mil go? Oh, there it is. Beautiful brake lines. I did a dang good job on that, if I do say so myself. Yeah, I did. All right, we've got the hard lines pretty much installed. Just need to add a couple of brackets, but they all fit right down there. Everything is attached. Now it is time for the clutch line. One of the things that comes up with the Beams 3S GE swap in an AE86 is a clutch line. And this is also a common question that comes up with a SR5 to GTS swap in an AE86. How do I get the Beams slave cylinder to work with an AE86? And it's pretty much the same thing as an SR5 to GTS swap. You need a clutch line that's gonna go from the master cylinder across the firewall over to the right side of the car or the passenger side of the car and down to the slave cylinder, because for the beam swap, the slave cylinder is on that right side of the transmission as well. One of the products that I've seen is from Chase Bays. This is just a pretty generic hydraulic hose. It's a stainless steel braided, I think, with a black Teflon coating or some coating of some sort. What's nice is on one side it's got a 90-degree fitting, and then on the other side it's got a straight fitting, both of them with banjo bolts that thread right into the slave cylinder and the master cylinder. Install is pretty straightforward, so let's go ahead and look at it on the car as we put it on. Step one is to get the straight banjo across the firewall and over to the transmission. To do that, you gotta take the bolt out of it. And what we're gonna do is we're going to route it across the brake booster between it and the firewall. So you end up having to thread it through from like the slave cylinder side and just get that position through. It's a really tight fit, but you can snake it through just like so. Now at this point is when I'm going to hook up my banjo fitting, at least get it hand tight. So you got the banjo fitting, you got your bolt, you've got two washers. One washer goes on either side of the fitting. And now we're gonna snake this down into there. And I do this so I can get the line oriented how I want, because it's only gonna fit one way pretty much. And you can see the 90-degree fitting there points it right perfectly towards the firewall and back behind the brake booster. Now for me, I really wanted this line to be routed like factory, so I've got it kind of here lined up with my brake lines, which I have one factory line and one that I had to make, which is a nickel copper fitting. And then we're gonna snake it down right along the firewall and drop it down to where the slave cylinder is, down at the bottom here. Here we've got our slave cylinder. Here's our fitting. Where it bolts to is right here on the end. There we've got it started. Now we'll just tighten it down. So there we've got it across the engine bay, over top of the engine, underneath the throttle cable, and then it ends up coming and ends up shooting down right here. It's just not quite long enough to route over and down, so it's like right next to the heater core fittings. I don't know if you can see that. Now I did try routing it like under the brake booster and over, and that actually ends up taking up more space or more line, so it ends up super short and pretty much sitting on top of the bell housing. This is the best way that I can get it across, but that's how it is. At least it takes out the guesswork of trying to bend hard lines, even though it may not be a perfect OEM fit. Now that we've got all the brakes plumbed and everything, it's time to bleed the brakes. We're gonna do that using this Motive power bleeder. I saw these a couple years ago. Wow, it's over 10 years ago now. When I was a technician, I used them a couple times, super fantastic. They're pretty affordable. I think this was like 60 bucks. So it's a pretty good tool to have in your garage if you find yourself bleeding brakes a lot, especially if you don't work on cars with your buddies and it's just you all by your lonesome. These are very helpful to be able to bleed brakes as a one-man operation. You can see there's just a light film of grease on there. It's not enough to contaminate the system, just enough to give a better seal around the top here, because it could be a little uneven. You know, this is an old brake master cylinder. I don't have a brand new one, so it's possible that it might not be the best seal. Now toss our chain on it. Now I like to have the J-hooks facing the inside rather than the outside. We're gonna get it on the tightest link we can. That way we don't have to thread it forever. So now we're going to go ahead and snug down these J-hooks. We're gonna go ahead and add our brake fluid, which I use Amsoil Dominator DOT4 racing brake fluid for all my cars. Go ahead and add a couple bottles of this. let's try this again. Take 2 of trying to bleed the brakes. I had to put a new master cylinder on because that one there is junk. I couldn't even get it to bench bleed. It kept locking up and I couldn't get fluid to go through it or out of it or anything. So I got another one from Amazon, which is a little different than stock. The reservoir and the line is a little different, but everything hooks up. It also has this threaded end in it, which is kind of weird, but all right. But it's painted black, so that looks nice compared to the old crusty, junky one. Something that I've done to help rig this up so I can control the fluid flow, so that way it doesn't end up all over the car, because that did happen. That's one of the complaints people have. So I just took this, which is it's a hose clamp of sorts that I can pinch off a hose. So I've added that here so I can pressurize it, and then when I see the fluid levels going too high, I pinch it off. And then I watch the bleeding to make sure all the fluid is actually going out at the caliper. On my car, I also had to depress the brake pedal, so I just used a piece of the jack handle and went between the seat and the brake pedal. I can't really explain why, but this is just what I needed to do to allow fluid to pass through the master cylinder to the actual brakes. Every time I bleed the brakes and I let fluid go through, I come back up here to check on the fluid level, and I open up my valve and let fluid flow back into the master cylinder, pressurize it, and push fluid through, and I close it back off again. I know at this point I have good fluid, or I have no air bubbles coming out of the back, so I'm gonna close up the bleeder. We got fluid out of this side, now we're gonna go ahead and switch over to the other side. We're back in the garage. All 4 corners of the brakes are bled and the clutch is bled. So the clutch was really easy to bleed. You know, here's your master cylinder there. I've got a pretty nifty tool for that. This guy. What I have for bleeding clutches is this, which is just like a giant syringe. And you fill it full of brake fluid, or clutch fluid, same stuff, but you fill it full of clutch fluid, and then what you do is you crack the bleeder at the slave cylinder right down there, and then you hook your water bottle with your vacuum line on it, whatever, to collect the fluid, and then you're going to put a little bit of fluid in the reservoir. And the reason why this works really well for clutches is because right down, at least for this, right down at the bottom of the reservoir is the port that the fluid goes through. To go to the slave cylinder. So all you do is crack the bleeder, fill this full of fluid, jam this down against that port, and force the syringe down, the plunger down, and it forces fluid all the way through. It just took like 2 squirts, and then it was full. And it only took like, I don't know, like 30 seconds to bleed. It was super sweet. So yeah, brake bleeder syringe. It was pretty neat. I didn't need to do any kind of bench bleed or anything either. I just forced fluid through it and it was good. So yeah, that's it for this video. Next up, maybe we'll have the coilovers installed. I'll have a video to show the annex coilover install, since I've already got a video out talking about them. They are on the car at this point, but I do have some footage to show all about the install and the neat stuff that I found when I was putting it on. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all that stuff.